June 1940. Europe was burning. France had fallen. The swastika flew over Paris, and Hitler's armies stood at the edge of the Channel. Only one nation remained defiant: Britain. On the cliffs of Dover, soldiers stared across the gray water toward the conquered continent. The beaches were quiet, but everyone knew what was coming. Operation Sea Lion, Hitler's plan to invade the island, would begin only when the skies belonged to Germany. In London, the mood was grim but unbroken. Factories roared with life, forging engines of resistance. Spitfires and Hurricanes rolled out of hangars like miracles of steel and speed. Volunteers filled the Home Guard. School children were evacuated. Mothers waved through the smoke of steam trains, trying not to cry. And at the center stood one voice: Winston Churchill's. "We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall never surrender." His words were not speeches, they were weapons. The invasion was coming. But first, Britain would have to survive the storm above. In July 1940, the Luftwaffe came. Waves of bombers crossed the Channel, escorted by sleek Messerschmitt fighters. Their goal was simple: crush the Royal Air Force, destroy its airfields, radar stations, and will to fight. Day after day, the sirens wailed. British pilots scrambled to their planes, barely in time to meet the German swarms. The sky filled with vapor trails and fire. Over Dover, Southampton, and Kent, dogfights erupted like duels between gods. The Luftwaffe had numbers. The RAF had home. They flew from fields hidden in hedgerows, refueled in barns, slept in the dirt between sorties. Ground crews patched bullet holes with tape and hope. When one Spitfire fell, another rose. Hitler expected Britain to break in weeks. Instead, he found something he could not understand: resolve. For every bomber that reached its target, 2 more fell into the sea. The Germans called them the Few. Churchill would make the name immortal. They were boys, barely out of school, Canadians, Poles, Czechs, New Zealanders, Britons, united by one sky. They flew without rest, eating from tin plates, sleeping beside their aircraft, faces smeared with oil and exhaustion. Every day, they took off knowing that they might not return. The odds were impossible. Fuel was scarce, planes outnumbered 2 to 1, and the enemy came in endless waves. But something greater than courage kept them flying: a belief that if they fell, no one would be left to rise. In control rooms across southern England, women of the WAAF tracked every aircraft on massive maps. Radar, a new secret weapon, gave Britain eyes through the clouds. It was science versus might, precision versus pride. Churchill watched from the war rooms, smoking in silence as reports arrived. On August 20th, he spoke to Parliament. Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. And in that moment, the few became legends. When the Luftwaffe failed to destroy the RAF, Hitler changed tactics. If he couldn't break the pilots, he would break the people. On September 7th, 1940, the Blitz began. Hundreds of bombers roared over London, their bellies glowing red with fire. The docks burned first, then the city itself. Families huddled in underground stations, clutching one another as bombs shook the earth. Night after night, the inferno grew. Coventry, Liverpool, Manchester, entire cities became ash. And yet the British spirit refused to bend. Children drew chalk hopscotch squares beside craters. Milkmen delivered bottles through rubble. Firefighters, soldiers, nurses, all became heroes in their own right. When dawn came, London still stood, scarred, but unbroken. The Luftwaffe had tried to terrorize a nation into surrender. Instead, it forged its unity. By October, the tide had turned. The Luftwaffe, stretched thin and bleeding, could not maintain its assault. British radar picked up fewer raids each day. Their bombers grew careless, their losses unbearable. Hitler postponed Operation Sea Lion indefinitely. The invasion of Britain, the first step in his dream of world conquest, had failed. The sky belonged not to eagles, but to lions. In the hangars of the RAF, pilots gathered for the first quiet evening in months. Some laughed, some wept. Many simply stared at the empty chairs of those who had not returned. But all knew they had done something extraordinary. They had saved their island, and perhaps the world. Above them, the sunset turned the sky the color of victory. The Battle of Britain was over, and the age of Hitler's invincibility was finished. Autumn 1940. The nights grew longer and darker. Under the pale glow of the bomber's moon, waves of Heinkels and Dorniers crossed the channel. London burned again. The hum of engines became a lullaby of terror. Families slept in underground tunnels, packed shoulder to shoulder, singing to drown out the bombs. On the surface, firefighters battled infernos that swallowed entire streets. From St. Paul's Cathedral, a single dome stood above the flames, defiant, luminous, unbroken. That image would become the heart of a nation's endurance. The Luftwaffe called it morale bombing. But the effect was the opposite. Every raid only deepened Britain's determination. Children drew flags on the walls of shelters. Volunteers handed out tea amid the ruins. And in the skies above, the RAF hunted the bombers through the moonlight, relentless, tireless, merciless. The war for the skies had become a war for the soul. The Spitfire, elegant, fast, agile. The Hurricane, sturdy, dependable, deadly. Together, they became the twin wings of salvation. Their Rolls-Royce Merlin engines screamed across the sky, slicing through clouds like thunder made of steel. But it was not just machines that won the battle. It was the people behind them. Women in factories riveted wings and forged engines around the clock. Mechanics patched bullet holes with nothing but scrap and willpower. WAF controllers guided squadrons by radio through chaos and smoke. Britain had turned its entire society into a weapon. Every factory, every farmer, every mother waiting by a silent telephone was part of the front line. When a Spitfire streaked across the dawn sky, it carried not just a pilot, but a nation. By late 1940, the numbers told the truth. The Luftwaffe had lost over 1,700 aircraft, the RAF barely half that. German pilots, exhausted and disillusioned, began to call the channel the ditch of death. Their commanders had promised easy victory. Instead, they faced radar-guided ambushes, fuel shortages, and unbreakable resistance. Hitler raged in the wolf's lair. Göring's confidence crumbled under failure. The Reich's air superiority, the foundation of its war machine, had been shattered. The shift was more than military. It was psychological. For the first time, the Nazi war machine had been stopped. Britain stood bloodied but unbeaten, proof that Hitler could fail. As winter set in, the skies grew quiet. The invasion barges rotted on the French coast. The Battle of Britain was ending, and with it, the myth of German invincibility. In the aftermath, Britain stood alone, but stronger than ever. The Blitz still raged, but now it was endured with pride. Churchill walked through bombed neighborhoods, his cigar glowing through the smoke, his bowler hat tilted defiantly. He spoke not as a politician, but as a father to a nation of fighters. This was their finest hour. The people of Britain had discovered something extraordinary, that courage could be contagious. Ordinary men and women had stood against impossible odds and prevailed. The RAF had not just saved Britain, they had saved hope itself. Churchill's words reached across the Atlantic, stirring the conscience of America. A message was clear. Freedom was still alive, and it was worth defending. When dawn broke on the final day of the battle, Britain's sky was clear. The enemy had retreated. The war was far from over, but the impossible had been achieved. The Battle of Britain became a symbol of defiance, of resilience, of the strength of the few against the many. Its echoes shaped generations. Every contrail in the sky became a memory of those who fought with nothing but courage and thin wings of metal. In the quiet after the storm, the pilots of the RAF, boys who had become legends, returned to their bases. Some laughed, some cried, many said nothing at all. They had carried the weight of a nation, and they had not faltered. Above them, the clouds drifted like ghosts. Freedom, for now, was safe. Victory came at a price that could not be counted in medals. Across southern England, the fields were littered with wreckage, twisted metal, shattered wings, and burned-out engines that once roared with life. Of the nearly 3,000 RAF pilots who fought in the battle, more than 500 would never return. Their comrades called them the few, but each loss was felt by thousands. Letters stopped arriving. Empty bunks stood in silence. Families received telegrams written in cold, official words. Missing in action. Presumed dead. The Luftwaffe's casualties were far greater, but their defeat had a face: exhaustion, disillusionment, and the slow realization that the war would not end swiftly. For the first time, Nazi Germany had been forced to retreat. Britain had survived, but the cost of survival was written in grief. The Battle of Britain was a triumph of courage and a tragedy of youth. Through the winter of 1940, the Blitz raged on. The bombs fell, the fires burned, and yet London refused to die. Every morning as the smoke cleared, shopkeepers swept the ashes from their doorways and opened for business as if nothing had happened. Church bells, once silenced by order, rang again to announce survival. Photographs captured the spirit: a milkman delivering bottles through rubble, a woman smiling beside a crater, a child waving from a bomb shelter. These were not acts of defiance. They were acts of faith. In cathedrals and taverns, in schools and air raid shelters, people prayed, sang, and rebuilt. The bombs could destroy buildings, but not the British will to endure. The world watched and learned. Resilience is stronger than fear. By 1941, the tide of war had begun to change. The failure of the Luftwaffe forced Hitler to turn east, toward the vast expanse of Russia. Britain had survived the storm and now stood as the last free bastion in Europe. Across the Atlantic, President Franklin D. Roosevelt watched closely. He sent supplies, ships, and words of unity. The alliance that would one day liberate Europe was born from Britain's endurance. Meanwhile, in the skies above the Channel, the RAF was no longer defending, it was attacking. British bombers struck at the heart of Germany, bringing the war full circle. The hunters had become the hunted. The Battle of Britain had not just saved a nation, it had saved the possibility of victory itself. When the war finally ended in 1945, the world celebrated. But for the men of the RAF, The silence that followed was deafening. Many returned to ordinary lives, farmers, clerks, teachers, carrying memories they would never speak of. Some found it hard to believe they had once saved the world. They had been boys when they flew. Now they were men, haunted by the ghosts of those who did not land. Each year they gathered at airfields and memorials, their hair graying, their voices soft. They looked to the sky, where once they had lived and fought. And in those moments of remembrance, they were young again, the guardians of freedom, the few who stood against the storm. The Battle of Britain remains one of history's greatest moments of unity, when courage, science, and faith combined to defend civilization itself. It was proof that the will of free people could overcome the machinery of tyranny. Today, the sound of Spitfire engines still echoes at air shows, their wings glinting in sunlight as they once did over Kent and Dover. Each roar is a reminder of sacrifice, of defiance, of victory born from desperation. The world remembers not just the planes or the battles, but the spirit that refused to yield. Because the Battle of Britain was not only a military triumph, it was a moral one. As Churchill said, "If the British Empire and its Commonwealth last for 1,000 years, men will still say, this was their finest hour." And indeed, it was.